The New York Mets continue to be carried by their pitching staff, as it was not a very pretty game by the Mets lineup on Monday, but they did just enough as Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor led the Mets to a win with a couple of sac flies.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, on yesterday's show, when I previewed this game, I talked about my concerns with Adrian Houser coming back to Citi Field to face the New York Mets, because anybody that's been a fan of this team for some time knows former Mets just seem to have their number. And unfortunately, I was right to have those concerns. The Mets had a pretty ugly game against Houser. They just got nothing going throughout this entire game. Brandon Nimmo doubled in the first inning out of the 2-hole. Francisco Lindor grounded out before him. Juan Soto and Pete Alonso grounded out after him, and that started a string where Adrian Houser retired 16 straight Mets. Perfect innings in the second, third, fourth, and fifth. Francisco Lindor got a 2-out single in the sixth inning, and the Mets did nothing with that. So through 6 innings, Adrian Houser gave up 2 hits. He did not walk a batter. He struck out 6. Now, Houser is not some great pitcher. Now, we saw last year that when he's dialed in and he's got command of his sinker, he can keep the ball on the ground, he can keep hitters off balance, and he can have a start like this one. I don't want to completely belittle Adrian Houser and what he is as a guy that's been a pretty quality major league pitcher for some time. With that said, it's not like he was blowing the Mets away. It's not like they had nothing in the zone to hit, but they looked lost for the first 6 innings of the game. The 7th inning, Houser did start to lose it. Juan Soto drew a leadoff walk. Pete Alonso worked a full count. He was able to then hit a line drive to the opposite field for a base hit. The Mets got a little something cooking. The White Sox then went to their bullpen to face. They brought in a lefty to face Jared Young and Brett Beatty. The Mets countered with Starling Marte for Young. Marte grounded out. It was a force out at second. He beat out the throw at first. He had runners at the corners for Beatty. He had a comebacker that easily could have been a double play ball, but the pitcher made a mistake just throwing it to first. So the Mets still had a chance in that inning. And then Tyrone Taylor drew a walk to load the bases for Jeff McNeil because the lefty wanted no part of the right-handed Taylor. But Jeff McNeil struck out, and they stranded all 3. So through the first 7 innings, the Mets did not score a run. On the other side, though, as we've seen all year, this is a team that continues to get carried by their pitching staff. And we're all waiting for the day when this is the lineup that we all thought the Mets were going to have, where they're going to be carried by Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, and Pete Alonso. And I still think that's out there. I still think at some point this season, this group will find their groove collectively, and this still can be a very good offensive team. But in the meantime, they are very lucky that their pitching staff continues to be so consistently excellent. And Clay Holmes did a great job. He gave a run in the 4th inning where he issued a leadoff walk, then a double to put 2 runners in scoring position with nobody out. Gave up a sac fly. Then Francisco Lindor made an outstanding play, a rocket hit to his right, makes a great backhanded pick, sees the runner trying to advance in front of him, makes the quick throw to third. They get the guy on a rundown. They get a big out there to cut off a runner in scoring position. He then is able to wiggle his way out of that jam. And the defense was outstanding all game. Pete Alonso made multiple diving stops. His throws weren't always pretty. Clay Holmes helped him on one. Huascar Brazaban later in the game helped him on another. But just still a really good defensive game all around. Jeff McNeil made a crazy diving play to open up the 6th inning. Clay Holmes then got a fly out before he gave up 2 base hits, and he walked to bat to load the bases. Prior to those 3 hitters, which did end the day for Holmes, he'd allowed just 2 hits and 2 walks through 5 2/3. So I thought Holmes was very solid. The Mets go to Jose Butto in a bases loaded situation, and I about lost my mind because, as anyone who's been tuning into this show this season knows, I have had a real issue whenever Butto comes in with inherited runners because typically they come around to score, but he had a big moment here as those stats, which I don't have in front of me. The last I checked, it was like maybe 7 of 9 inherited runners had scored on Butto. Now he gets 3 stranded inherited runners as he did get a ground out to get out of the jam. I will note, though, he got ahead 1 and 2, and then he completely lost the zone. And he was lucky that Edgar Caro, in a 3-2 count, swung at ball 4, fouled it off, and then he was able to get one in the zone, and he got a ground out to get out of that jam. Butto stayed on for the 7th inning, got the first out. Then he walked the next batter. The Mets go to Huascar Brazoban. That's where Pete Alonso made that great play, and Brazoban probably made an even better one to catch the bad throw and get his foot in there to get the out. He then struck out Mike Tauchman to get out of that jam. The runner had advanced all the way to third base, so that was a big moment for Brazoban to keep the Mets just a run away from tying the game. He then got 2 outs in the 8th inning, one of which was an incredible catch to lead things off by Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo, running towards the wall in the left field corner, just reaches out and is able to grab it and then able to slow himself down before crashing into that wall. This is a guy that was playing for the first time in a couple days after a neck injury, was re-aggravated, a long-time neck injury from 2019. So I'm sure anytime he's going near walls right now, he's probably a little bit apprehensive, but he made a great play. And while Nimmo, for the large portion of this season, hasn't really done it offensively, although he did have a good game in this one with a couple of hits, what you have to acknowledge about Nimmo, he has played an outstanding left field this year. I think this is the first time that he's really been in contention to potentially win a Gold Glove. Will he get there? Who knows? The way that award is voted on is always, it's not always the best fielders that ultimately win it. That's why Juan Soto has been a finalist multiple times. But Nimmo deserves some recognition for the way he's playing left field. I think he's been awesome out there. And after that catch and Brazoban getting a couple outs, he does issue a walk. And then it was a walk after the catch. He gets another fly out. And then the Mets go to Jose Castillo to face a lefty. Castillo walks that lefty, but gets a big strikeout against a righty to get out of that jam. Another thing I talked about in yesterday's show is that if the Mets could keep things close in any of these games against the White Sox, they have a massive advantage in the bullpen game and in the ability to win close games late. I mean, this is what the Mets have done all season long. And luckily, they were able to pull it out in the final 2 innings. Credit Francisco Alvarez. We're going to talk about more in the next segment. Who will be the primary catcher moving forward? That's what we're going to be discussing. Credit to him. Didn't look great in most of his at-bats during this game, but he did lead off the 8th inning with a base hit. That got Luis Angel Acuna on the bases. Acuna advanced to third on a single by Nimmo. Then Juan Soto got the job done and hit a sacrifice fly. So nice moment there for the Mets to tie up the game. They had a chance to get a lead and put Edwin Diaz in a save situation in the 9th as they loaded the bases for Brett Beatty, with Pete Alonso getting intentionally walked and then Starling Marte getting hit by a pitch. But Beatty hit a line drive into right center field that ended up in Mike Tauchman's mitt, and they stranded those 3 runners. Edwin Diaz, though, pitched a scoreless 9th. Tyrone Taylor leads off the bottom half with a double. Taylor continues to play extremely well. I'm going to touch on his play in the final segment today as we get into some of the injured Mets and a potential return sooner than later on Jose Siri. So we'll go through that a little bit. But in that 9th inning, Taylor's double really sets things up for the Mets. Jeff McNeil was intentionally walked. Luis Terens was able to get a base hit to load things up for Francisco Lindor, and Lindor calmly delivered a walk-off sac fly on the first pitch you saw. The Mets were able to outlast the White Sox and survive with a big victory. You want to sweep a team like this White Sox unit. I mean, they are not very good. You can see it. You can look at the names in that lineup. You can see some of the arms that come out of that bullpen. This is a team the Mets should sweep at home, but you still can't count on that. And this might have been the game for the White Sox to win. So for the Mets to hang in there due to their defense, their pitching, and then being able to load the bases in 3 consecutive innings, the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and able to at least get 2 runs across, it ends up being enough for them to win this game. So I thought overall the game was kind of ugly offensively, pretty beautiful on the defensive side of things at times. But it was just another one of these wins where the Mets found a way, and you can't knock them for that. But what I want to talk about in the next segment is Francisco Alvarez and Luis Terens. Both of these guys got big hits late. Which one of them should be the primary catcher moving forward? I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need for the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. If you're liking the video, throw a like on it and leave a comment. Who do you think should be the starting catcher of the New York Mets moving forward? Should it be Luis Terens or should it be Francisco Alvarez? If you look at the stats, they would suggest that Terens should be the guy for the New York Mets. He's hitting .275. He's got a .347 on base, .429 slug. That's a .776 OPS on the season. He's an absolute weapon with his arm behind the dish. While Alvarez has gotten better in that regard, I think at this point it's pretty fair to say that if Luis Terens is not better than Alvarez defensively, he's at least just as good, and realistically, he has looked better behind the dish defensively. Then you have Alvarez, who has now played 21 games this season. He's hitting .236, .321 on base, .306 slug. It's a .627 OPS. Look at the Mets lineup. The only hitters who have been worse this year by OPS, Luisangel Acuna, Jose Azocar, Hayden Sanger, Jose Siri, and now Jared Young, who is still looking for his first hit in the Mets uniform across 3 starts over the past couple of days. So how long do you ride Alvarez? Well, we already saw a shift where Terens played a couple games in a row over the weekend. So that did indicate, all right, maybe Terens is going to get a little bit more looks. You look at Alvarez, and he just does not look like himself at the plate. And you have Terens, who continues to be great, particularly with runners in scoring position. He's hitting .333 with the .429 on base percentage in those spots. So how long do you continue to trust Alvarez as your primary catcher, or even make it a 50-50 timeshare before you just decide that Terens is your guy? My answer to that question is you still ride Francisco Alvarez all season long. I'm sorry. I'm not giving up on a 23-year-old who has superstar potential, even if he never gets there. This guy has a significantly higher ceiling than Luis Terens. And this is not a knock on Terens. I think Terens is the best backup catcher in baseball right now. And he could start for a lot of teams and be a very good defensive catcher who hits for a high average and gives you gritty at-bats. That's great. He doesn't have the pop of Francisco Alvarez. Alvarez hit 25 home runs as a rookie. Luis Terens has played 352 games in his career. He still only has 23 home runs. Career high was 15, which impressively came when he was playing for the Mariners in 2021. But he has not shown any sort of consistent pop. With the Mets, he's played 81 games, so half a season across 2 years. He has 4 home runs. 4 home runs. His career high in the minor leagues was 15. But that was, I think, the only time he got over 10. Don't quote me on that. I know it's his career high. I didn't mark it. But if I remember, there was not a lot of seasons in the minor leagues where he was hitting home runs. Now, home runs aren't everything. defense is important, hitting for average is important, getting on base is important. But if there was a position where power was a little more at a premium, it is the catcher position, because there just frankly aren't too many all-around good hitting catchers in baseball. And so you see the Cal Rallies of the world who, I mean, he has become a pretty good all-around hitter, but most of his offensive game is predicated on the long ball. And those are the guys that typically have the most all-around success, is when you can get a catcher that hits 25 homers and gives you good defense. Now, Alvarez did that as a rookie and hasn't done it since. Last year, he only hit 11, but you look at his minor league career. Remember, this is one of the top prospects in all of baseball. He was a top 5 prospect in the game at one point. In 2021, he hit 22 bombs in 84 games at high A. Then he hit 27 home runs between AA and AAA at 21 years old in 2022. And then again, 2023 hits the 25 homers. Last year, he was better at hitting for average, better at getting on base than his rookie season, but the power did fade, only hit 11. With that said, he still works as hard as anyone in that clubhouse, is a leader beyond his years, and he caught every single pitch of an NLCS run. So, yes, Luis Terens has been better this year, no doubt about it. But he's played 12 more games. He only has 4 more RBIs than Francisco Alvarez and has only scored 2 more runs. Granted, again, he's been better when it comes to hitting for average. He's been better at his on-base percentage. But how high is the offensive ceiling really for Luis Terens? How many games can Luis Terens potentially break open with a 3-run homer? If Francisco Alvarez finds his swing, there's no doubt who's the better player. Last year, Francisco Alvarez hit 5 home runs and drove in 17 runs in September, a huge part of the Mets closing out their spot in the playoffs. A big reason why I'm not ready to give up on a 23-year-old catcher is because of that prospect pedigree, because of the flashes we have seen, and also because of the fact that this is a guy that completely revamped his swing in the offseason. He starts, building off of that in spring training, breaks his hand, and now had to once again deal with an early season injury just like last year, and he's trying to find himself. I look at Brett Beatty and the breakthrough he's in the midst of. I look at Mark Vientos and the breakthrough he had last year. Guys that were really good prospects, particularly with their bats, that finally figured it out. But also, when you look at Vientos, that can still continue to struggle because hitting in the big leagues is not easy. That's why teams only have a handful of guys, if they're lucky, like a Francisco Lindor, a Juan Soto, a Pete Alonso, guys that will have the numbers at the end of every season. And a lot of guys that throughout their careers will have a good year, then a bad year. You just don't know what you're going to get. But the upside of Francisco Alvarez is still there. He's still the catcher of the future right now. While Luis Terens is one heck of a backup, I don't think he's the future or the present of this team. Should he get playing time? Absolutely. Should they go with the timeshare and give Terens maybe 2 starts in every 5 games instead of 1 start in every 5 games? Sure. But Francisco Alvarez, to me, still needs to be playing just as much, if not a little bit more than Luis Terens, because of that upside, because he still has the ability to find it. And he's just so much more talented offensively, even if it's not shining through right now, even if he does not have his timing on fastballs and is getting blown up a lot. There's still a world whereby the playoffs, Francisco Alvarez is a huge piece of your offense. As great as Terens has been, I am more confident that Alvarez can reach a higher ceiling. And I also think there is absolutely a world where Luis Terens can regress back to the mean a little bit. Still a great backup catcher. I just don't think that he's the guy. Now, I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me, but a lot of you 2 months ago, or probably not even, call it 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, had lost all faith in Brett Beatty. And granted, Brett Beatty has looked lost a lot more in the big leagues than Alvarez has. I mean, they both have had their struggles, but Beatty's were probably a little bit more pronounced. He didn't have he didn't have quite as many good stretches as Alvarez has had up to this point. Neither's been able to sustain it yet, but they're both young players. And now you're seeing Brett Baty look like a completely different hitter. They've talked about the new approach where he's looking at that, what's it called? The eye track machine. Basically, if you ever seen a video of it, it's insane. It's like a full wall of a screen where you watch a pitcher throw to you and the ball comes out of the pitcher's hands like a real at bat. I mean, it's insane. So they have gotten Brett Baty now to the point where he can look at the starting pitcher and get some high intensity at bats before the game. And then by the time he gets out there, he feels like he's on his 5th or 6th at bat of the day. And that has been a real catalyst in his success. I'm going to give Alvarez some time to potentially find that or something else that works for him that gets him in a good spot, that puts him in a position where he isn't behind on fastballs. Because once Alvarez gets on time, he can go on a tear. So for now, yeah, timeshare, split things up, keep Terens involved. Absolutely. I also would not be mad at all if, Jeff McNeil's not starting and Francisco Alvarez comes up in a big spot in the 7th inning if you pinch hit. Like I'm not opposed to that. But you got to keep giving this guy run because he's supposed to be the answer long term at a premium position. And I have not seen enough yet that pushes me off the idea that he's going to realize that potential at some point. Will he get to the heights that I have hoped he would and talked about in the show where I've said that Alvarez could still be the best catcher in baseball? I still believe he's got that ceiling to live up to the best tattoo on his neck. Yeah, that might be way too lofty of expectations for him. But can he still become an all-star? Can he still be a top 10 catcher in the game? I still think that all of that is still in there. And I want to see this guy get to at least 100 plate appearances before I write him off. So patience in this case, I think, is warranted. And we'll see if he can find his way out of this early season slump. But I'm not hitting that panic button just yet on Francisco Alvarez. The final segment today, I want to talk about some injured Mets. When will Jose Siri and Sean Manaea come back? Got some updates on them, and how will their return impact the Mets roster, primarily in the second half. We'll go through it all in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Now, on Thursday, Sean Manaea will face live batters for the first time, and Jose Siri will be one of those batters. Sean Manaea is about 2 weeks behind Frankie Montas, who made his first rehab start over the weekend, which means you could be looking at a rehab assignment for Manaea in about 2 weeks. Let's just call it, for sake of easy tracking, Monday, June 9th is when he begins his rehab assignment. Let's say it's a 4-week ramp up. Best case scenario. That would have Sean Manaea back a little after the 4th of July. Now, it would be great if that timeline played out and the Mets could get 3, 4, maybe even 5 starts out of Sean Manaea before the deadline, just so you have an idea of what you have in your rotation. And I think the good thing is they will get much more than that, or I don't know about much more than that, but maybe 7, 8 starts potentially. I haven't done the math on it exactly for Montas when he comes back. I mean, maybe not 7, 8. I'm trying to count quickly, but they should get at least 5 from Montas. We'll say that. So it's really important that the Mets can see what those two guys look like, because there's every chance that is and I hate to borrow what feels like a Wilpon phrase of, hey, the guy that comes off the injured list is your deadline acquisition. But at times that can be the case. I don't know if the Mets are going to need a starting pitcher at the deadline. I think there's been a lot of discourse about that since the offseason and through spring training. When are the Mets going to trade for their ace? I don't know if they need to. They have Kodai Senga. If he continues to look great, and Sean Manaea comes off the IL and he is firing like last year, and Montas has plenty of upside, and you still have seen David Peterson and Griffin Canning look really good this year. I don't know if Clay Holmes can sustain this all the way through the marathon, but he's been very good. So I look at all of those options the Mets have, you count them up, and that's 6 guys. I just don't know if you can even add another pitcher into this mix. And if you should, I think the Mets pitching is fine. Potentially adding another lights out reliever, I think, is maybe a better pathway, but we'll see. That's a conversation for the end of July, not the end of May. But the point still stands that getting these guys back is so critical because you want to see if they're going to be impact arms or if you need to try to find one. So that's really good news that they're both trending towards a return. When it comes to Jose Siri, he could be heading towards a rehab assignment soon. Once he faces live pitching, he's already starting to run a little bit. I don't think that that's quite game speed yet, but Jose Siri was right when he said he's a quick healer. He very well could beat that original timetable for return, which was 8 to 10 weeks, or maybe get on the front end of that 8-week timetable. We'll see once he starts playing rehab games. I think it can come pretty quick for him. I don't know how he fits into this roster, though, because Tyrone Taylor has been unbelievable. Look at the last 30 days. Tyrone Taylor's played 27 games. He's hitting 316, 388 on base, 451 slug. Got an 849 OPS, all while playing great defense in center field. Right now, Tyrone Taylor is earning the starting center fielder job this year. And there are going to be some center fielders on the market. One of them we're watching in this series, Luis Robert, but I can't even justify a conversation on that one because he's been brutal. I think that contract suddenly looks brutal because you got two club options for, I think, over $20 million after this season, which at one point was viewed as a valuable contract when he looked like a stud in the 2023 season when he was awesome. He's been bad for now an extended run. Was bad last year. Has been bad this year. He's been injury prone throughout his career. I think people look at that contract and say, man, I'm just going to be taking a $20 million gamble on upside that might not be there. So I don't think Robert is the answer for the Mets. The guy that I would look at, and we actually have an article coming out on justbaseball.com about the Orioles and their trade pieces. Cedric Mullins is an interesting one because he could give you a left-handed complement to Tyrone Taylor, and he's a rental, so he might not cost you that much. The trade that I mocked in the article, I didn't write it, but I helped them with the mock trades, was Tyler McGill and another pitching prospect or a pitching prospect for Mullins because the Orioles desperately need pitching, and McGill is probably the odd man out at some point this season. So you could turn McGill into a guy that can potentially be a huge spark plug for your lineup, giving you some speed, a little bit of power, just a better all-around offensive player throughout his career than what Tyrone Taylor has put forth over a larger sample size. Again, in the short term, the way he's playing, if he keeps this up until the deadline, I think you're just saying Tyrone Taylor's your center fielder and you're moving on from it, especially because you have the ability now, as you've seen in the playoffs, if you wanted to start Jeff McNeil for the first 3 at-bats and then go to Tyrone Taylor. It's a lot of ways the Mets can play it once you get to that point in the year. But the point stands, Taylor is the guy right now, and I don't know what that means when Jose Siri's ready. Feels like he should be a pinch runner and a fourth outfielder and shouldn't get many starts. Yeah, you throw him in the game late for defense if you want to, although you're probably not going to sub out Brandon Nimmo or Juan Soto very much. So I really don't see Jose Siri, despite the fact that he's a bigger name, really offering much more to the roster than Jose Azocar, other than being a better version of that. And we just saw them make a move to bring up a bat over Azocar and Jared Young, who I think is going to get a little bit of run here. So I do wonder how the Mets juggle things. Sure, when Siri's ready to return, you can just take Jared Young off the roster and go back to a Jose Azocar type role for Siri, where he's just basically riding on the bench and maybe pinch running some and playing some defense, getting the occasional start. I just don't think you can pull Tyrone Taylor out of the lineup. The other thing the Mets could do is they could eventually send down Acuna and have Siri take on that, speedster role off the bench. I mean, he's absolutely capable of that. We saw his ability once he gets on base to find his way to score in his limited time with the Mets before he got hurt. So I think that's probably Jose Siri's value. But I also could see a world where they trade him or cut him this year, honestly, because I just don't think that he really is a piece that impacts your roster and warrants that roster spot over even a guy like Acuna. Now, I think you can buy time with Siri, give Acuna some everyday playing time in the minor leagues to hopefully get back to a better offensive rhythm before the end of the season if he continues to struggle. And Ronnie Mauricio gives you a clear-cut option that could replace Acuna in a couple of weeks because Mauricio is raking in Syracuse. 5-game hitting streak since coming back up to AAA. Currently hitting .556 at the level, 10 for 18. Small sample size. I did a show on Friday about the fact that he's not going to be ready for a little bit. They have to let him play every day and really get his legs under him in AAA. I still believe that to be the case. But in a few weeks, if Ronnie keeps raking, I could see the Mets flipping him in Acuna, especially if you're still not getting that much from Vientos and you are trying to find a potential combination in the infield that gives you more offense. Maybe it's Ronnie at third, Beatty at second. Who knows? Isn't it crazy that I think that I'd rather see Beatty play second base defense than Ronnie Mauricio? Like, I feel like Beatty might be better defensively at both spots than a former shortstop. It's crazy what Beatty has done defensively. But regardless, I think what you're looking at right now at the Mets roster with Jared Young and Luis Acuna is probably going to stand for a couple of weeks. But I do think that by the time that you get to the end of June, if not middle of June, it could certainly be Jose Siri in that pinch running role and Ronnie Mauricio as the backup shortstop utility infielder that's getting some starts and potentially playing some late defense. I mean, I think the Mets' best defensive infield when Ronnie Mauricio is in the picture would probably be McNeil at second and Beatty at third, but I feel like we're going to see that switch at some point with Acuna and Mauricio. So that's what's coming with this roster. The only other thing, Jesse Winker did work out on the field before the game on Monday here. Still no timetable for return. It's an oblique injury. I still think it's going to be some time before we see Jesse Winker back in the lineup. I'm not even entirely confident that we see it until after the All-Star break because obliques can just linger. But that's when the Mets will have to make a decision, when Jesse Winker is ready to return. Because if Beatty keeps this up, he's not going. Mark Vientos can't go. He doesn't have any options. Jeff McNeil's not going anywhere. You're obviously not touching Tyrone Taylor, Juan Soto, Brandon Nimmo. So the more you start going through this roster and the potential guys that could get cut, it comes down to Starling Marte, Jose Siri, or rolling without a backup shortstop and having Brett Beatty fill that role, knowing that Lindor is going to pretty much play every inning anyway. And then you just go with Jeff McNeil, Brett Beatty, and Mark Vientos at second base and third base. Obviously, Vientos at third, McNeil only at second, and Beatty jumping between the two spots. The Mets could do that. And all of this is assuming health across the board, which you can never really do anyway. A lot of these discussions end up being resolved simply because somebody else goes down. But the Mets are going to be in an interesting spot with some of the decisions they'll make once they get guys healthy, or in Ronnie Mauricio's case, once they think he's up to speed to potentially make a big league impact. So that's where the Mets are at right now with the guys on the injured list. And we'll just see how they eventually factor in. But for the time being, I think this roster is probably going to hold firm for at least the next couple of weeks with Jared Young continuing to get some playing time at DH, although I'd personally just have Vientos almost every single day there. Keep Beatty every day at third, and basically just platoon McNeil and Cunha at second. That's what I would do right now. But we'll see what the Mets choose on all those fronts. Now, quick preview of what's going to happen in the game today. The White Sox must have listed their pitchers wrong. On yesterday's show, I had Shane Smith listed as the starter for Tuesday. Shane Smith, the number one pick of the Rule 5 draft that has a 2.36 ERA in his first season with the White Sox. So he's been very impressive, but he's actually going to start on Wednesday. Yesterday, Sean Burke was listed as the starter on Wednesday, but Burke actually pitched on Friday, so he's not going to go in this series. Instead, it'll be Jonathan Cannon pitching tonight against Tyler McGill. Cannon has a 3.76 ERA this season and 55 innings pitched. He's been very good. Tyler McGill, 3.56 ERA and 48 innings pitched. When you're looking at the arsenal for Cannon, a lot of East-West. He's another single baller, which after what Adrian Hauser just did, kind of offers a blueprint to how to pitch to this lineup. Cutter, sinker, changeup are his primary offerings, throwing all of them a little over 20% of the time. Fastball and sweeper, the four-seam fastball that is, and sweeper, both thrown about 15% of the time. So he really does have a 5-pitch arsenal, and he goes to all of those pitches. But again, you're looking at a guy that's going to be mixing things east to west primarily, trying to get the ball on the ground. And hopefully the Mets can, look at the scouting report, figure some things out, and actually put up some runs and give McGill some support. Although I think Tyler McGill has a perfect matchup for him. This lineup of 4A'ers or top prospects that are still trying to figure things out. I mean, this is the type of lineup that Tyler McGill should absolutely carve. I look at the strikeout number if you're into betting, and I would take whatever the over is on Tyler McGill strikeouts at FanDuel because I think he's going to carve through this lineup, and hopefully the Mets will do a little bit better offensively in this game and maybe have an easier victory instead of just another tight one-run win. But as long as they get one in the win column, who cares how it comes across? So I will be breaking down whatever we see on Tuesday night on tomorrow's show. I'll also probably do a little bit of a look into the minor leagues since it's been a couple of days since we've done that. Brandon Sproat had a pretty decent start on Sunday, so we'll talk about some of the top prospects as well as we always do on this show. And make sure, like I will always tell you, to follow, rate, review, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll bring you around Major League Baseball and give you insight from all of our local experts on the games that were the day before. So make sure you check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.